So the big thing, says employees will, they shall have. I'm a big person, whether you use will, must, shall, they shall have a performance value evaluation at least annually, if not more often. So make sure this part here sticks fairly clear. It's strictly upon their competency and their performance. It's not about comparing to are they earning their wages. Their wages have been set, so that's not the focus. The focus is how are they doing performance wise. So try to make sure whenever you go through this process of preparing that you're thinking about that. And some key notes here. There are two key notes. Is that I'm hoping that you're having more discussions with these folks in their performance than yearly. There should be some, depending upon what line you're in, what division you're in, and what your folks do. Sometimes you should have conversations more often, maybe less. That's you as a supervisor to determine. That's the discretion you have. And then if employees are going to get a below 3 rating, there should have been a build up to that point. There should have been another discussion before you have a sit down with them and saying you're 2 or 1, because it shouldn't be a surprise for one. If it's a surprise, then we've done something wrong. So make sure that if an employee is going to get a 1 or 2 rating, that you have something done, but you've done something up before that. Um, is that fairly clear? Any questions? Hopefully everybody in TV land can hear. If anybody, can the folks on the Google Meet, can they talk through the speakers?
No, we're having audio problems. I'm not sure anyone can hear you, to be honest. I'm trying to figure it out.
Copy that. All right. Well, hopefully this is recorded and folks can see it. Okay, so make sure that whenever you're doing these evaluations, you're focusing on about the last year or since the last evaluation. Don't try to bring up anything further than that. Don't dig into the past. Yes, some things can build upon each other, but typically these annual or these evaluations, whether they're annual or a little shorter or longer, should only be for that period you're examining for. So make sure you keep that period into account, because it can mean a difference depending, especially when it comes to corrective actions or when it comes to awards. Not to go with the bad, but for both awards or corrective actions, you got to be looking at that period of evaluation. So this is the basic chart here to 1 through 5 in the description. So, you got to make sure that is clear with everybody, including yourself, that a 3 is that basically you're doing everything that the job requires, that you're consistent or that they are consistently doing it. There's a little bit of room for there that, okay, they might have needed a little bit of training, or maybe there's a little bit of conduct issue that had to be addressed. But in general, they were doing everything the job requires. If you go to 2, you can see inconsistently. So when I see inconsistently, that means you're having to address some things more than just a few times. And that's a generality. You have to use your good judgment with that. So, if it impacts the work that they're doing, if it impacts your team, your group, 2 might be appropriate. If it's more than that, worse than that, okay, then maybe 1. But 4 is meets. You got to look at the wording. Notable examples. They meet the expectations with. So they're going a couple of steps above. There are some things that you can think of or they have made notes of over the year to make that employee a number 4 very good. So, and then 5 is outstanding. So of course, a lot of us, we're used to bell curves. So a majority of your folks should be, if you're setting your expectations, understand them correctly, they should be more 3s than anything else. I would hope not many 1s or 2s, but then there should be a few 3, 4, or 5s. So when you're doing your evaluations, if you're doing all 4s and 5s, look at your expectations and see. Maybe you have a crew of superstars, but just make sure that you have the data to back it up, the information to back it up. I kind of was discussing this already. Most common, and definitely make sure you use the reason section for the evaluations, the reason for the score. It'll help you whenever you're having that discussion, because this is really your prep sheet for your discussion. You'll use this sheet to have the discussions, but that's the sheet that will have everything you will speak from. So the better your wording and the examples that you have in there, the better the discussion you can have. Everybody good and still awake? I'm just glad it's not a 1 o'clock meeting or training. All right. As it says here, anything that you had to deal with a person disciplinary wise, you need to address that. And there should be it should be discussed and the reason for the score, especially if it's going to drop it below a 3. It should be discussed. Any questions with that? All right. I'm advancing faster than I want. Okay, so big things. Don't just go through the process just for the sake of going through the process. This does take time. So you really need to do due diligence and spending time reflecting on what your employees have done and giving them a fair assessment. And that's why you need to spend the time. Rule of thumb is 30 minutes per person. That's a good number. So, spend the time on it. Some folks are easier, some folks are harder. So average it out. And another good idea is to, after you have written up the evaluation, come back to it later that day or another day or two later. Give yourself time and make sure that you captured everything. Because sometimes after we've done the initial draft, there might be other things that we thought about. So don't rush through it. Give yourself time to go back and make sure that you have put everything on there that you want to talk to the employee about. Because some of you have a lot of folks under you, and it is a bit of a process to go through and think about everything that folks have done, unless you've made really good notes. This is kind of an easy flow chart. The big thing is evaluations need to be honest. So make sure it's honest. Make sure that you're as unbiased as you possibly can be, that focusing solely on their performance and conduct, not on anything else. And again, we just talked about not marking boxes, and we've already discussed the 30-minute rule. Okay, so the second part to this is that there's going to be a growth and feedback conversation. So this is something that you need to be prepared whenever you have your discussions with employee, because basically you're going to talk about their performances, you're going to tell them how they did, and then you're going to switch right over to growth and feedback. And this is really where you're going to make your money if done right. Because the big thing is with growth and feedback is the goal is to have people believe that you are concerned about their growth, about what their goals are, and then that you are there to support them. And I think everybody has seen on the back sheet all of these questions. Your folks should get this or should already know this beforehand what the questions are, and they should be prepared to have a conversation. Now, one thing I want to make sure that everybody knows is that don't believe that you have to do everything in order to make the employee successful to meet their goals. Basically, you're there to listen to them, to help them with their goals, because some folks might not know what they want to do. So, with your experience, you can kind of help them go in a direction or two, give them guidance. And let's see, and then, of course, record it in Oracle. Right here, it says we'll watch a video, but it's a 20-minute video. I'll just ask that within the next couple of days that you take a look at it. It's 20 minutes. It gives you a little more guidance on the growth and feedback in regards to how to conduct it and also how to record it in Oracle. So I have to watch it myself. I haven't had an opportunity yet. So as mentioned in the beginning, this is a pilot for us. So any notes, any lessons learned that you have afterwards, please bring them to the group because we're probably going to have some things that we need to adjust. Whether these 4 questions, I think I said 6 questions, but 4 questions, whether these 4 questions are the appropriate questions, and maybe there's other means of supporting each other, like should we have other information on there or something to that effect. Let's see. And it talks more about the video. Again, getting your folks' input, and then also, really kind of dig about what they could do better. Some folks, it's not obvious. Some folks need help understanding what they could do better. And this could be an opportunity to help them think about what they could do better. And this was a good point that was in the brief. We do have a lot of high performers, but the question is, do they know that they're high performers? Do they get recognized enough? Make sure that you do recognize them in the performance evaluations, and then other opportunities come up for recognition or awards that they are given those. So don't forget about them. All right, this is basically as I call it, the plan of action and milestones, POAM. So basically, this is the timeline that we're going to follow. In a nutshell, our goal is to be done with all of these by, I think it's by the end of August, basically. So this is a timeline for you to get your performance evaluations filled out and sent up to your supervisor, so we can just make sure that we're managing expectations correctly. So you can, I think this brief should be available to all of you, so you don't have to sit here and study and make notes. But I think we're on track. You know, today's the 12th of July, so we're having the meeting to discuss this. And then the next step will be supervisors, you all providing stuff to your next direct line supervisor. And that's on the 21st. Hopefully some of you started already. And that's pretty much it. Yes. So that's pretty much it. Are there any questions about yes?
That's a functional question. The virtual was not working. I just want to make sure that DTS knows so they can send out the links to the stuff.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Are there any examples? I kind of wanted to be a little bit of an open forum. Does anybody have examples or anything that they want to discuss? It can be hard rating your team. I've been with teams where all of my folks pretty much were 4s, and it gets really hard on evaluating them. So the big thing is trying to be as specific as you can with the tasks, the actions that they are doing to make sure you can. Yeah, Josh.
I don't have an example, I just had a question about
Yeah.
the first two bullets on the current slide. We have questions 1 and 2, and then we skip 3, we have 4, 5, 6, we have 5 questions. Can we explain how, because it seems like they're kind of saying the same thing, you got annual performance review and employee evaluations. How are they different, those two bullets?
Question 1 through 3 are annual performance review, pilot addressing. So basically, 1 and 2. So on the growth and feedback, the first question is, what do you think is a good way you could grow professionally or personally? I don't know. What's the best way to answer this, Ben?
So what the mayor sent out before, I don't know if this is doing anything, but what the mayor sent out before was the 6 growth and feedback questions. And what DPW is doing different than the rest of the city is we replaced the first 2 questions of those 6 growth and feedback questions with our performance review. I don't know who asked that question, but yeah, does that make sense? So there were 6 in that list of things.
We went from 6 to 4. So we're just addressing those 2 questions in the annual performance review, but we're not changing anything about our annual performance review questions from last year. It's just the same questions. I don't know what 1 and 2 were.
There were questions related. So you can see it from that video link. If you watch the video link, you will be able to see all 6 questions fully detailed. And hopefully you will agree with me that our performance review, discussing the 5 performance areas, do adequately address the 1 and 2 growth and feedback questions. We reviewed this with Daniel at HR. That was his recommendation as well. So those questions 1 and 2 from the 6 growth and feedback questions, our 5 performance review process, we feel adequately covers those spots. If anyone has any questions, you're certainly welcome to add more stuff to the other 4 growth and feedback questions. It's just a method of trying to figure out how to tie the 2 together and still get everything done for the 244 people we have in Public Works and get this moved through.
And then the next question, is it actually 3 through 6, I guess? On the slide?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Sure.
think that's the intent. I think that was just dismissed on the slide there for that 3rd one. So when you watch the video, for example, that the mayor sent out, he lists out, and then there's one that HR sent out that actually lists out all 6 of the questions in that 7-minute video. The first 2 of those, because I think the intent, HR's intent was growth and feedback for a lot of departments is happening outside of the time when the evaluations would need to be done. The House Public Works evaluations have just been completed a year ago. the thought was, let's go ahead and see how it works to incorporate the two things together for Public Works. And so that's the reason why numbers 1 and 2 really, they're redundant questions. If you were to do the employee evaluations and then sit down right after that and ask the employee the 6 feedback questions HR sent out, you would be asking questions 1 and 2 on the same issues that had already been dealt with on the evaluation. So we're essentially, because we're doing 2 of them essentially concurrently, then that means 3
Well,
to 6.
I also see what you're saying. That should say, that should be a 3 instead of a 4. That's a typo.
Right. And then on the second page of the performance evaluation, it sets goals that we have for them. But questions 3 through 6 of growth and feedback really wants to know what the employee has as a goal, right? So once we meet, do we then adapt our goals for them based on what their growth and feedback was?
So I think the answer, I'll start out with part of this and you have to chime in. So because of the way Public Works form had already been put together and we already had essentially these things already on the back and they were part of what we did, that's the reason why we're piloting them together as only 4 questions instead of 6. So think of it more along the lines of the front part of the sheet is employee evaluation of what they've done. Growth and feedback is about looking forward to the future, which is what the intent behind the citywide growth and feedback is really all about. So I don't think it's not fill out the front and the back and then sit down and ask the same questions and do the same thing all over again. It's really do the front and you're doing the back. Those 2 things together are employee evaluations and growth and feedback. That's my understanding of how it is that this looks like what we did before because it is what we did before, but that's the reason why ours is different and why Public Works is a pilot instead of just seeing only these 4 questions.
So your question is, are you responsible to make their growth and feedback, their their goals, try to help them accomplish their goals? Is that?
Well, I mean, I may have goals for my employees that are separate from their goals. Yeah, so, and then adapting those or adding and meshing them.
Right. I mean, that's essentially, I mean, your goals that you have for them as a supervisor is critical. You have to have that so they have some ways of getting better at whatever it is they do, whatever those goals are, whether it's improving their performance, their technical capabilities, whatever it is. But for the growth and feedback, it's to understand what they want to do. So, yeah, so maybe you can tailor it a little bit, or maybe you can help them as in just giving advice. I mean, it's not intended on you have to help them reach their goals. It's to make you understand what their goals are and then kind of direct them, because you might not be able to do anything with it. I mean, there might be things completely off the ball, like maybe they want to learn how to make pottery or something like that. I don't know. It's just one of those things where you want to have a conversation with them just to kind of know where they are and how you can help them as a supervisor. I'm sorry, pottery is good, cool. I know. But so it goes back to that emotional intelligence. You need to have a conversation with them to understand what is it that they're trying to accomplish. Because we have some folks out there that are perfectly happy staying where they are, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. There are some folks that want to go far, and you need to know that, because if you're not challenging them, they might become an underperformer and become disgruntled. But with our network here, if you find somebody that wants to do something and you can't really help them, but you can let somebody else know that so-and-so is interested in, doing something that you don't have any experience in or knowledge in, you can direct them that way. And one thing I forgot to mention, I'm glad you brought up, is the mentorship piece. Is whenever you have these conversations, one thing you should ask your folks, especially the ones that, want to do a little bit more, ask them if they have a mentor. And it should be somebody probably not within their supervisory chain of command. It can be, but my recommendation is that they should reach out and talk to somebody that has something similar with those goals, whether it's the position that they want to go in or career field they want to go in. So the whole point of the growth and feedback is to let them know that we have a vested interest in them making the goals they want to, especially if it benefits the city, because there's folks that want to move up through the city and stuff, and there is a benefit to having folks that come from the ground up. So long way of answering your question. Does that answer it?
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
You're happy with it? But we can talk later. We can talk later. All right. Does anybody have any other? Yes.
I think we're gonna get questions about, is this time to pay next year? Any guidance on how to fund that?
So I think the answer is yes. Is that right, Ben?
So so this one review we're doing right now is not. In future, it will
Right.
be. So, we think the very likely will be the next, performance review happening sometime around the end of the year. So, that will probably be looking at when the future license all pilot. So definitely the answer is no for the August or July, review. But going forward, this is what we're looking at doing. So that's kind of just looking at, we're making sure people are getting honest reviews. And if we see everybody that stays at 5, just look at honest review, stays at 1. That's not honest. We do have different levels of performance. So they'll be looking at, how we rate everybody, how we kind of help us figure out the HR folks and, budget figuring out how to move forward and turn this into something to be a merit-based system.
I did this round, that's what I didn't understand.
Yeah, and I.
Good question.
This is gonna kind of be like a ball. I mean, basically what it's gonna do, so it's gonna kind of give us an idea where you're at, and then you'll want to improve by the time that it does take effect, where it can be done.
That's a very good point. And so, and also a good caution too, make sure you evaluate folks correctly, because if you say a 4 now, but then next time it's a 3, that doesn't look really good. And of course, people will be upset about that. Anytime you drop somebody on a rating, they're definitely not going to take that well, especially if you don't have very good documentation. So very good questions. So thanks, Ben, for that. So yes, eventually it will be, but not at this point in time. I have too many stories. Any other questions before we dismiss for this time, for this training? And this isn't the only time. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me and let me know if questions you have or concerns, and we can address them before you go on this journey. I know a lot of this isn't your first rodeo, so but just let me know if you have any questions or if you have any lessons for me to improve. So with that, that's it. Thank you, everybody. Clapping, come on. Because I got it under, well, I almost had it under 30 minutes.